All right, you can start.
Okay. Um, Hello, everyone. Welcome to our presentation on Bitcoin and Zcash. We are group number 5. My name is Vinay, and I'm joined by my partners, Fred and Chen. So I'm sure at this point, go to the next slide, Chen. I'm sure at this point you guys have all heard about the blockchain from other presentations as well as on the news, through your own research, etc. But just to give a little bit of an overview, the blockchain is essentially what powers the existing Bitcoin infrastructure as well as a large part of Zcash. And essentially what it is its mission is it seeks to replace trusted third parties in the exchange of digital goods. And nowadays, currency also happens to be traded digitally. So it seeks to create a currency on the back of the blockchain, which will remove the need for a trusted third party. So think for a credit card, I don't need to validate with a bank. I can just validate with everyone who has a credit card. And you know, it's not hard to believe that after the 2008 financial crisis, the distrust in financial institutions was very high. And that kind of gave Bitcoin and blockchain, a good environment to grow. So how does the blockchain work and what does it provide? It basically uses public key encryption as well as a proof of work to validate transactions on the networks. And this allows us to have a distributed, irrevocable audit trail of transactions. So a block is essentially the transaction itself. So how much and to who. And the chain is the history of all of the other transactions. So now going on to the next slide, talking a little bit more about what is Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the unit of exchange on this blockchain, right? Or any blockchain, well, in this case, the Bitcoin protocol. So the blockchain provides Bitcoin with the attributes like we discussed in the previous slide. You know, you have an audit trail of transactions distributed across all membering nodes, guarantees, prevention of double spending. Double spending means I can't have one coin and give it to both Fred and Chen. I can only give it to one. So this also eliminates a need for a trusted third party. So this way you're relying on the work done by everyone on the node rather than just one institution. So in Bitcoin specifically, there's also an incentivized proof of work. What this means is everyone who works towards validating transactions, whoever can actually validate it, gets a payout of Bitcoin tokens. But it's important to note that Bitcoin isn't without flaws. And one flaw, which I personally find really interesting, is that, you know, if you get a majority of the nodes, which I imagine would be very hard if it was scaled out wide enough, if you are able to get a majority to collude and generate your own version of the chain that is different from someone else's, you could make some limitations of fraudulent transactions. So now moving on to the next slide, it's flaws like that, as well as another, which I'm going to talk about, which led to the creation of Zcash. So what is the flaw that led to the creation of Zcash? Well, it's the public key infrastructure itself. If someone finds your key, now they know how much you have in your wallet and who you're transacting with. So while encryption does provide us solid integrity of the actual transaction, it now takes all of your financial information. If you're using the blockchain as a currency or Bitcoin as a currency, it now makes all of your transactions public. So Zcash originally started as a zero coin project, which then became Zerocash, which now is Zcash. And essentially, it is built on top of zero knowledge proofs, which were created back in the 1980s, along with a lot of the theory that goes behind Bitcoin and the blockchain. And basically, what a zero knowledge proof allows you to do is, validate something without knowing what's inside of it. So essentially what it does is it shields the transaction. So this way I know that this version of the chain is true, but I don't know what happened before I touched it. And this is all wrapped in the ZK Snarks protocol. So blockchain plus anonymous transactions equals Zcash. But Chen's going to go a little bit more into detail about the transactions themselves, and we're soon going to learn that it too has its flaws.
Okay, hello everyone. As we know from Vinay, transaction is the most basic and important part of cryptocurrency. But how is it structured behind the blockchain and how it will cause trouble? I will talk a little bit in detail for this. As for Bitcoin, one transaction consists of three parts: header, inputs, and outputs. Header stores all the metadata, including Bitcoin protocol version number, inputs, and outputs counter, as well as block locking time. Bitcoin protocol version number indicates the encryption method this transaction uses, and it is also decided by blocks. So one block will be using one Bitcoin protocol version number through the whole block. An inputs-outputs counter will tell you how many inputs and outputs inside the transaction. As for block locking time, it is just the time that this transaction is created and broadcast in the blockchain. For inputs and outputs, inputs just mean how much Bitcoin will be spent in this transaction, and output indicates where it goes. Inputs includes two important parts. One is transaction pointer and output index. It's just that points to the previous transaction outputs and tells you how much Bitcoin is in the input. And also include encrypted script called script-seq, which have the sender signature and public key. Combine the key together, the nodes will verify the user's ownership of the Bitcoin. For outputs, there are two important parts as well. One is a encrypt script called script pub key, which has the receiver's Bitcoin address and the spending conditions. Another important part is how much do you want to give this address. So in order to explain this easier, you can take a look on the picture at the right. So for the Bob, it is the standard example for one input and two outputs. One input, Bob wants to send Alice 0.5 Bitcoins. So, but he has the inputs as 50. So he has to send 49.5 back to himself as a change address. Change address is a protection procedure for Bitcoin. If he don't send that to himself, so he will lost that part because the transaction is the only record for Bitcoin trading. So that's it. And for Alice, she is a typical example for multiple inputs and one output. Alice combined three inputs from different transactions in one and give it to the employee. Then I will be talking a little bit more about double spending prevention and confirmation number. In order to prevent double spending, as Vinay said before, there are several procedures have to be done. Like the verified mining nodes must scan the blockchain blocks between current transaction block and the latest block, and to make sure there is no other spending between them. Like Bob sends Alice 0.5, and he cannot send any. He cannot send to 0.5 to John with the same inputs at all. That's how it works. And for confirmation number, also reference the appearance counts for the transaction in blockchains. It is considered as the trust score for single transaction. The more confirmation number you get, the more that transaction the more trustworthy the transaction will be. Now I will move on to Zcash. So the Zcash structure is very similar to Bitcoin, just using the different protocol that I said before, called the zk-SNARKs protocol, based on zero knowledge proof. By doing this, the inputs and outputs can be shielded, which means they cannot be detected by outside. So when they broadcast, the input and outputs are just undetectable. So on the right, they have four types of Zcash spending types. They call Zcash ZIC. So the unshielded one will be public one, so we know who sent to who. And the shielding one and deshielding one will just be we just shield the either sender or receiver. And we have the ultimate private one, like we don't know who sent to who, like we just know how much. So as we mentioned before, the change address for Bitcoin, they generate that because the privacy purpose. But for the Zcash, they no longer need to like compute the change address at all. Then I will be moving. I will give. Then Fred will talk a little bit more about how privacy issues is caused by Bitcoin and how Zcash still has some problems. Fred?
Okay. Okay, we are going to talk about the privacy benefit of Zcash. Zcash offers so many benefits than Bitcoin, and one of them is that Zcash provides a unique privacy and confidentiality. As Zcash allows subscribers to opt out of publicizing their transaction address. And this helps crypto enthusiasts with a unique privacy settings to guide against theft from wallet. Another benefit is that is estimated price rise. This means that the price of coin will fluctuate depending on the demand and the supply in the market. However, a deficient supply in combination with an extremely high demand will eventually lead to inevitable climb. The last benefit is trusted trading system. This means that Zcash will give every investor the dream flexibility and speed of transaction. Okay, imagine a world where all phone calls, emails, and expenditure are not receive necessary protection backing. This means that Zcash is based on a robust firewall against unauthorized surveillance. Goodness. We have seen the benefit, but we also have the downside of Zcash. And one of them that Zcash does not encrypt data from multiple signatures, protect against correlation made with public transaction. And in order to overcome this, Zcash should be used alongside Tor in obtaining protection against network eavesdropping, which is a complementary to transaction privacy. We'll move on to the conclusion.
Yeah. So in conclusion, we know that cryptocurrencies are still developing, and each coin has a different purpose. While Bitcoin set the standard for the usage of a coin, it's by no means perfect. We clearly saw the private key infrastructure flaws that were in place, or the public-private key infrastructure flaws. And Bitcoin's rise will lead to many more cryptocurrencies to come, including Zcash, which solves a specific aspect of Bitcoin, but still potentially could be improved more. But it's also important to note that while we talked about these things in forms of currencies, they're being used as well at large institutions. I believe J.P. Morgan Chase built out their own internal blockchain, not to be traded on the public market, but more so internally used to validate transactions within the scope of the bank. And they built it off of Zcash and worked directly with the Zcash founders. And every time you're going to have a new coin, there's going to be a new opportunity to find a fault. And that's kind of what we see in the space of cryptocurrencies. So I hope you guys enjoyed this presentation, learned something out of it, and appreciate your time. Thanks.